I wanted to you, little pal, to get one or two, little pal. I want you to put, to carve and to drill, to take some catch-up so the father can feel. And when the guns for the pay, little pal, I hope things will be all right, little pal. If the draws £3.10, that's £2 for the hard hen. 30 bob for the sale, little pal.
Welcome to this podcast looking at the Chopwell Lockout of 1925. This podcast was co-produced by the local community with Digital Voice in partnership with Chopwell Community Centre. The project was funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund.
The first-hand accounts you will hear telling us of life during these difficult times come from recordings stored in the Oral History Archives at Beamish Museum, Gateshead Libraries and the Yorkshire and North East Film Archive. A lot of these recordings were made in the early 1980s. The song you hear was also found amongst the archives, sung by Rhys Elliott.
All the people you will hear lived through the Chopwell Lockout and they tell a story of hope through hardship. They cover a range of perspectives from children, miners, mine officials and even one from a policeman.
Together, these voices give us a unique insight into the incredible community spirit and belief in social justice that enabled the people of Chopwell to endure 17 months of hardship in the fight for workers' rights and better conditions for all. We will hear stories of Little Moscow's links to the Russian Revolution and how the workers educated themselves and joined the class struggle, and learn about the community leaders, many of whom became pioneers of the early labour movement. I'm Helen Nisham and I've born and bred in Chopwell and lived here all of my life.
I'm Joe McNestry. I've lived in Chopwell all my life and I come from a family of sort of ex-pitmen, miners. My granddad was a miner, my dad was a miner.
We are both lifelong residents of Chopwell and our family connections to the village stretch back 100 years to a time when Chopwell was seen as a hotbed of revolutionary activity. To begin, we hear from D. Mallet, the son of a mine official, or gaffer as they got called around here. He shares an account of the conditions that led to the lockout and the tensions that simmered within the village.
That was 1925 when Chopwell came up as a lockout. And then the big strike, the general strike, came in June 1926. The Considine Company, who owned the collieries. Well, of course, the men had speaking in general, the workers had a fair wage during the war, same as they had in the Second World War. And of course, the time came when the Considine Company had to start spending a lot of money on renewing the plant and bringing it up to date. The only way that they could do that, I don't think, the government was probably bankrupt. They couldn't get anything off the government. They had to reduce wages. There was the miners' unions, because there were more than one. They were federated into one, headquarters of Durham, which became the NUM. Right. They called the Durham Miners' Federation in those days. And the Coal Owners Association, they had meetings and they decided that they would pick Chopwell and the Considine companies, I call them guinea pigs, as a test case. That's the proper way of putting it, a test case. And because Chopwell was 100% patriotic, I mean, I lost an awful lot of men during, I can remember, during the war as a boy. So they were patriotic, but at the same time they were militant of socialism. They wanted more money, they wanted better things for the workers, you see. Shorter working hours, holidays, and so on, which were unheard of in those days. And of course, it was a headquarters of the socialists, one of the headquarters anyway, who don't know where the other ones were in England at the time. And against the background of the Russian Revolution in 1917, which followed another one in 1919, of course, on one side, that encouraged the workers, that those ones that were that way minded were in the minority, I would suggest, you see. And of course, on the other hand, the owners, colliery owners and people, you know, the upper classes, if you like, were dead scared, or some of them were again, you see. So that's why the Considine Company was chosen, accepted that they would reduce wages. So it was a Lockout really at first. And then other ones followed on, you see, until they had most of the pits, well, practically all the pits in Great Britain. Odd ones weren't, but most of them were on strike. And then they had the amalgamation with the miners, the railway union and the dockers. They formed three, called a general strike, lasted about a fortnight. During that time, of course, there was, amongst certain people, and there were a lot of people, there was a very bad feeling between the middle classes, the bosses, if you like, and which was only natural, I suppose. Well, of course, all the officials kept the pit open and provided enough coal to keep the steelworks going. We managed to keep them going. The steelworkers didn't come out, although there were in and out with odd strikes. Shall we say, peacetime we had gangs and used to fight each other, you know. You know what I mean? But it intensified any bad feeling that there was, you see. It was a question of them and us. Oh, I used to get chased at times. You used to have to make your mind of whether to stand and fight or run away, so we didn't used to run.
Next, we hear from Andy Lowther, one of the 9 brothers in the well-known Lowther family, who was so important to the whole social justice movement in Chopwell. Andy opens with a passionate reminder of why he believes the early miners' struggle continues to resonate for working people today. He then discusses the history of the political thought in the village at the time of the lockout and how his brother Will introduced his beliefs to Chopwell.
Well, the object lesson in our lifetime, it's the lesson of working class struggle. Because whatever the bleak position appears to be today from a Labour working class political point of view, we must remember the beginnings, the events that we've been talking about earlier in the century, when people had these ideas for reforming things, and later spreading of the gospel, which to miners was the gospel, the nationalisation of the mining industry, the taking out of the hands of the cruel men who had operated the industry and exploited our fathers in the most cruel fashion, for us to continue struggling with a feeling that we were going to end this. I still think that. So that for anyone to pause in the present discussion on the fight against unjust laws, as exemplified by Tebbit and Thatcher, we must continue the struggle. It's going to be no worse than the struggle of the early days against those conditions that we remember in mining villages. Chopwell was a remarkable place. Everything was new about Chopwell, comparatively with the rest of the Durham coalfield, and our family came there in 1906. I was 2 years old, and by that time Chopwell was already a very good union pit, and there had gathered there a whole lot of fellas that were of similar type to my brother Will. Some of them had been closely linked with the Methodist chapel, but as time went on, these became identified with the anarchist socialist movement. The circumstances were that my brother Will went to what was then the Central Labour College in London. This was a voluntary place, and it was formed after a revolt at Ruskin College, when the principal, Dennis Hurd, left and took with him a number of students, and they set up this college in London, and it was supported principally by the South Wales Miners' Union and by the National Union of Railwaymen. one of whose leader was a very great lecturer. And the college lasted till well into the 20s. And at the college, Will met a very rich man called Davison. And Davison was a rich man, anarchist, if you like. And was keen on meeting people who were interested in anarchist or radical ideas. And Will brought him to Chopwell. And by this time, this man was the principal representative for Kodak in England. He'd been to America before the First World War, you know, being interested in photography. So Davison came to Chopwell, met the local lads, and decided to provide a club for them. And he bought these premises, which had been a local ice cream shop, and it was an ideal building. It had several floors. And it became the headquarters of this anarchist, later communist club. And it had a library donated by various people, donated in some instances by the members themselves. But all books of a radical nature were there, and it produced an effect on lots of these people.
There were, of course, anarchists who had some influence round here. People like Prince Peter Kropotkin, who used to stay with Cowan and spoke at the Miners' Gala. And I wondered whether you came across the writings of Kropotkin or Bakunin, who said that man is human because he revolts, because he will not accept things as they are and is wanting to change them for the better. Did these anarchist ideas...
Oh yes, the favourite one being, all property is theft.
This is Proudhon.
That's Proudhon. Mm. And statements like this were day-to-day matters for remark in our circles. Then later, the man who popularised these sort of ideas was Oscar Wilde, when Oscar Wilde said, "There's one law for the rich and another law for the poor. There should be no law for anyone."
I see. Well, besides having these seditious meetings, and I don't know whether the police were keeping you well under surveillance while you were in the anarchist club, what other activities were going on there?
Well, in 1913, we had started the Socialist Sunday School, and we already knew that there were other places to go to than chapels and churches. And anyone with an early socialist training, the precepts of the Sunday School.
Can you remember any of those?
Observe and think in order to discover the truth. Do not believe what is contrary to reason. Never deceive yourself or others. Which one did you wish to see?
I'm afraid my memory's not as good as it used to be.
But then there was the Declaration.
Yeah.
And this was a banner made by a man called Black, who'd been the leader of the church choir, but joined the Socialist Sunday School. And he made this beautiful banner. He was a pitman, but like a tapestry. "We desire to be kind and loving to all our fellow men and women, to work together
As brothers and sisters.
And live together in peace and harmony."
Now, George Alsop and Anthony Wright provide a historical account of how Chopwell earned the nickname Little Moscow. George, a former executive committee member of the Communist Party and later secretary of the Chopwell Miners' Lodge in the 1950s, not only explains the origins of the name, but also recounts the remarkable story of how the miners drove out Oswald Mosley and his black shirt thugs.
One of the reasons, I believe, that Chopwell was named Little Moscow was due to the strong political feeling at that particular time of the Communist Party, because you had a lot of local trade union and council leaders at that particular time. Whilst they weren't members of the Communist Party, they were strong supporters of the Soviet Union, particularly after the revolution. They could say that the revolution was a stepping stone to the emancipation of the working class throughout of the world. You've got quite a number of people in the village today that still supports the Soviet Union in its activities, although not as many as I would like to say. And Moscow, Little Moscow, used to receive, in fact, I think there was somewhere in the region of about £1 million sent to the, I'm not sure whether it was the Durham Miners or the National Union of Mine Workers. At that particular time, they sent £1 million to aid the struggle of the miners. And Chopwell village got quite a substantial amount of that in food and clothing, shoes for the bands and this sort of thing. And we used to get regular visits from the real rebels and the real left wing of the Labour movement at that particular time. Such fellows as Jim Larkin, the Irish rebel, T.A. Jackson, who was a propagandist for the Communist Party. There was the Will Lawther, he was a propagandist, whereas he was never a member of the Communist Party. The Lawthers family, in fact, they were very active politically, and it was well known, and it was a common practice that the police used to be drafted into the village at one time. They used to be drafted away from Leeds and down from the Midlands. There was farmers, there was all kinds of, some of the funniest looking policemen that ever you saw in your life was drafted into Chopwell to try and smash the political element that was taking part at that particular time. And it was common to see the police smashing public meetings up, either at the corner end or in the local co-op hall. In fact, there was one time Mosley spoke at Chopwell at the hotel corner end, and he was a member of the Black Shorts then, and he brought his thugs along with him, and Joe Beckett, the boxer, the well-known boxer, he was a member of the fascist movement at that particular time, one of Mosley's bodyguards, and he set up a soapbox at the hotel corner end to have a meeting, and the lads got themselves together and they smashed that meeting up. We never held the meeting, despite the fact that he had some of the police there for protection. And it was a real humdinger that I think it was on a Sunday night.
One of the things that gave Chopwell the name Little Moscow was that the Russians were pretty good with the Chopwell miners. They organised things among themselves, and they sent money to the Chopwell miners. Not a lot, but if I remember right, we got 10 bob each member, and we would get it a few different times, not a lot of times, maybe half a dozen times, 10 bob each. And also they sent a cargo of fish, and it was sold in Chopwell to the miners that were on strike at a penny a pound. And these were the things that we just built some new houses. And we called one Lennon Terrace. We called one Marks Terrace. We called another one Owen Terrace. Man, I don't know who Owen is, but he's a big socialist. And another one, E.D. Morel Terrace. No, they're the names. They're still there, and that's where they originated from. Next thing you heard was when you saw Chopwell, anything about Chopwell in the paper, it was always Little Moscow. Well, in those days, it was a popular sort of thing, that, because there was quite a lot of communists in the place then, by then, among the strikers and that sort of thing, and but I don't know whether there's any now. I don't have any now. It's one of them things that came, and once they got the tag Little Moscow on, it always was there and always will be there. And you're nearly ashamed at some of them, you know, when you go and they know you're from Chopwell, they say, what, Little Moscow? Pack of heathens, you know. That was the way that we were looked on with a lot of places.
In the following section, contributions from Anthony Wright and Jenny Smiles reflect on how the people of Chopwell coped with extreme hardship, seizing every opportunity to survive, all while retaining their sense of humour.
The coal that came out of Chopwell, they had their own private line, right from Chopwell here, right to just below Scotswood Bridge. And they used to go by rail. They were all in 20-ton trucks, you know, maybe about 20 times 20. And there was a whole string standing just, no, the high side of the streets. There was only a wall between the line and the houses. And they hadn't got them taken away when the strike started. So the first thing the people did was go and knock the bolts out and tip all the coals. And there was some, I'll tell you. And the people just went and got them. And these police was there. They were there, but they were helpless because there was too many people there, you see. And them coal was taken away. The people just got them anywhere near, bags and buckets, anything, put coal in, and they got the lot. And they just got a sergeant here at that time. I think his name was Curry. But anyway, he was standing at one of the usual meeting places across the corner end where the chaps used to gather. There was nowhere else for them to go. And he says, I'll stop the Chopwell men from pinching coal before I've been here very long. And nobody said anything, but that night his house was attached to the police station. That night somebody went into his yard, broke his coal house open and took all the coals he had out and swept it up after them. And nobody knew who'd done it. But it had been somebody that had heard him bragging about what he was going to do to the Chopwell men for pinching the coals, so the pinched his. And they never got to know who'd done it because there was some of them got 6 months for pinching a bucketful out of the ones that tipped. So I don't know what they would have got if they'd caught him from getting his. when we came out on strike, we signed on the dole, and our dole was allowed, and the pit owners, who were the Country Iron Company, appealed again the decision, and it was reversed. We weren't given the dole. And we hadn't anything at the beginning. The people at that kiddies, they were going to the soup kitchens. Well, the soup kitchens for the men as well. And that's all they had to rely on. And then we got a very, very small amount of public relief. The man that was leading Chopwell in those days was a chap called Jack Gilliland. Now, he was the chairman of the lodge. He was a member of the council, and he was a member of this body that used to hand the relief out. And when anybody was going to seek relief, he used to say, "I'm going to try and get us started Gilliland's Drift." That was what they called it, Gilliland's Drift. And anybody that could get their nose in, then they were there. I can always remember somebody asking him at one of the union meetings that was on during those times, "Aye, but how long will it last?" He says, "No matter how long it lasts, get in and get your share time it lasts." Didn't last very long.
And there was the means test, you see, who came under that, who'd been so long on the dole. And it was terrific. I remember one day going to my sister's, and she had a boy and a girl at school. A fellow came in, and he was just sitting. I can remember he had plus bows on, and he sat there, and I wondered. I said to my sister, "What's he want?" She says, "He's waiting Tommy coming in." So when he came in, when Tommy did come in with his dole, 20-odd bob, he said, what do you want, lad? You know, it's a pitman. He says, "Well," he says, "I've got to see." He says, "You might be sending your 2 children to their grandma's, your wife's mother, for their meals or something." So he was there to see. And Tommy said, "Lad, if you don't get out of here, I'll kick you out." The means test was as bad as that, honey.
You lived on fresh air. You sometimes got a meal, sometimes you pinched a meal. And I've said this, not only to you, but I've said it on the bench. I've said it to my colleagues on the bench. Anybody that's got nothing and they're hungry, they'll pinch a meal. And as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing wrong in that, providing the pincher off somebody's got plenty.
What a tough time it must have been for them. Jimmy Little and George Alsop share memories of how Chopwell residents organised themselves to support one another as the strike's effects took hold. They describe how local businesses that aided the police could be picketed and even shut down in solidarity with the miners.
As the people got organised in the village, in Chopwell village, which was before the general strike, we came more self-contained by having no money, but everything was more or less put in a pool, the food. Everyone was a friend of everyone. If anyone was in trouble through sickness or anything like that, there was always plenty of help. Because remember, we couldn't pay for doctors. We couldn't pay for nurses. It always had to be by voluntary help. And when a woman was having a child, well, we used to have an old lady called Mrs. Sedgwick, and she was the mother of it all. She was the midwife, she was the nurse. If there was anything the matter with you, you went and saw Mrs. Sedgwick. And there used to be a wooden hut down against the King's Picture Hall, and this was converted into a boot repairs. Now, all the kiddies' shoes used to come there, and there was men, not craftsmen, but men out of the mines used to come and do the work and repair the shoes. Another organised thing was, this was with the help of the Considine Company, when people was needing coal. They allowed us to have the loan of pit ponies, and the miners went over into Chopwell Wood, which was I'm not sure of the proper name of it, what I call the Burn Wood. The men built a bridge and broke into the side of the Dean, and we used to take turns of going and working a shift. Then I was a pony driver. I used to go down, be on a shift, and it so happened that everyone in Chopwell, especially the aged, got 2 bags of coal, maybe once a fortnight, to keep them going. But it was well and truly organised, right from start to finish. There was no going in and, as we did at the beginning, going into little holes in the Deans and digging, but this was a real organised plant.
One of the reasons why we were able to hold out as long, particularly from a personal point of view, was the fact that my dad was a local, well-known pig breeder in the village, and at that particular time he used to slaughter your own pigs, and we were always assured of having a pig lying at the bottom of the pantry, salted and legs of ham hanging from the roof, from the ceiling at the top of the stairs. So we were assured of a meal there. And it was this sort of thing that used to keep a family together and keep them going.
Next we hear from Ada Cowell. Although she was from Crookhill rather than Chopwell, Ada offers a sobering insight into how many families survived without income through soup kitchens and mutual aid.
The memories that I have of the 1926 strike are very sad indeed, because I fully realised, being a little girl, how short food was then. We went to the soup kitchens at Crookhill Store Hall. The first morning I went, we queued up outside the store hall and were given a breakfast of 1 slice of dry bread with raspberry jam on and a cup of cocoa that wasn't very milky. This I was a little bit disgusted at. Most of us left the cocoa because it was too strongly made. On the dinner hour, we queued up again, and there was a huge zinc bath full of broth, and my friend Beatrice Scott from Addison Colliery was pushed into this bath of broth, and her leg was scalded. And it was known afterwards, whether this was a joke or not, I don't know, that we had to drink the broth that Beatrice was scalded in, and this put us all off. I arrived home at tea time. I lived with my granny and grandfather, and my granny asked me what I'd had to eat. I started to cry, told her the whole tale, and she said to my grandfather when he came in from the garden, "George, if we have to eat green grass, the bairn is not going back to those soup kitchens anymore." I didn't go back again, and I was jolly lucky. And being as I didn't go back, people used to think that my grandmother was very rich. The whole point was she was a very proud woman and was a good provider. And she had a larder, which she always stored things in for the harder times. And this is what we actually lived on, the larder and homemade goods. All the men cultivated the gardens for need, and most of the meals were salads, garden potatoes, cabbages, etc. We had an orchard near us where we collected all the fruit, and it was bottled and made into jams. The women baked bread when they could obtain the flour, etc. And we found that the only shops that gave them their credit, or tick as it was known, was the co-op stores. They really stood by the pitmen. The small shops didn't have the money to renew their stocks, therefore they couldn't give credit. And the co-op stores saved hundreds of children from starving, I think. One neighbour of my grandmother's, Mrs. Taylor, I used to play with her two daughters, Iris and Eleanor. And she had the flour to bake with, but she had no coals to heat the oven. So as little girls, we all wore pinafores and we scrambled down on the line that ran from Stargate Colliery to the Addison Colliery and knocked the chocks of wood out the sides of the railway lines and put them in our little pinnies. When we'd got quite a few, a voice shouted from the Addison Pit tunnel, and out of the tunnel emerged the local policeman, and we were absolutely scared stiff. He chased us, and we all flew to Mrs. Taylor's coal house, where we emptied the produce and stood there in the coal house, scared stiff to come out in case the police got hold of us, because things were getting to such a state the police were even taking the little ones in then. Times were very, very hard. The relief given for a child to keep a child was 2 shillings a week. My granny, being a very proud person, did not take the relief. But my granddad was in a club, a buffalo club it was. I think the proper name is the Independent Order of the Buffaloes. And he got some sort of help from this club, which kept me. And my people at home, my brothers and sisters, were not so lucky. My father had to take the relief and be jolly glad of it. But when the relief was on, there was also a means test. And most of the council house people were scared stiff of the means test man coming round, because you never know when he used to snoop on you. A man daren't stand near a pub doorway because someone reported him to the means test man, and whether the means test man had seen him or not, he used to investigate, and 9 times out of 10, some of his money was stopped. Our headmaster, the late James Buchanan rather, lined us all up in the yard, came round and inspected us, and gave free vouchers to children he thought was in need. Now, he spread these vouchers out very, very fairly, giving everyone in the community a chance that he thought was in need. I was given a voucher on the grounds that I lived with my grandparents. And I went to the stores at Crook Hill and obtained a pair of boots for the footwear voucher. And these boots were so heavy I could hardly wear them, but I was really very, very proud of these boots because I realised it was something that my granny didn't have to struggle for to get. I was given 2 cotton dresses. The material was very, very poor. And the designs on the dresses, well, they may fit in these days, because these days we have got loud designs on dresses. But in those days, everyone was so reserved that we sort of looked down upon these dresses and were quite ashamed to wear them. Therefore, the poor really didn't get such a help up. They were still kept in that class for anything that was given to them. My grandmother was a conservative, and she didn't mind socialists, but she hated communists, and she always classed the Lowthers as being communists. And she used to hate the name of Lowther because she feared that it would bring strikes. And it was through listening at home to all these conversations and seeing the poverty and the needs of the people round about that made me realise that socialism was the only true thing for the working man. And this is why I became a Labour Party member.
It's interesting to hear how Will Lowther inspired people from different areas, as in Ada Cowell, because obviously, she wasn't from Chopwell, but it inspired her to get involved in the Labour movement. Now, Andy Lowther and Ralph Hodgson recount a pivotal event in the miners' struggle when Will Lowther and Harry Bolton were arrested while attempting to stop a strike-breaking food delivery. They describe how the demonstration that followed was violently suppressed by the police.
The general strike had been on from the Monday till the Sunday. And Will and Harry Bolton, as representatives from the Chopwell end, had gone down to Bladen to inquire into a rumour that there'd been a baton charge of miners. They went down, got to know what had happened. There hadn't been anybody hurt. And on the way back, they met a grocery van distributing groceries.
At Winlayton Mill.
And Harry Bolton, who was chairman of the Bladen Council, says this is illegal. It's against the shop laws. It's against the Shop Act. It's against the council bylaws. You cannot distribute groceries on a Sunday. But unfortunately, up pops a police superintendent and a group of policemen. And Harry continued to lay down the law to let the police know that
He knew the
this
law.
was a legal matter. And the superintendent says, that's enough. You're both arrested. And they took them away, they missed their Sunday dinner, locked them up at Felling. They were charged, were refused bail on this heinous charge of trying to observe our good local authority laws. And he was sent to Durham jail when they were remanded. And they remained there until they were brought for trial at Gateshead.
Well, I never knew that Will had been arrested until Steve landed to my house and asked us would I run him to Felon on the motorbike. He was going to try and bail Will out. And I agreed to take him to Felon. And on the road to Felon, he thought I wasn't going quick enough. He wasn't going to get there sharp enough. He told me to put the bloody thing away. And of course it was all to no avail, because when we got there they wouldn't accept any bail. They wouldn't let him out. The demonstration marched from High Spain, accompanied by the High Spain band, brass band. And of course during the trial they were all assembled outside the courthouse. Quite quiet, man. There was no bother outside. But after the trial, and the band and the followers were on the road home along Askew Road, the police must have known which route they would take to go home, and they were there waiting of them along Askew Road, bashing them with their batons.
They were running always into people's houses and the people's backyards, anywhere to get out the road of the battens.
The police moved into the middle of the demonstration, tore down the banner, busted the drum, started battening, and my brother Eddie was accompanying them. But Eddie, having seen these sort of things before, ran off, ran into a house, complete stranger, ran through the front room, out the back door, and got clean away. Later, a full report appeared in the Northern Light. This was written by Eddie, and my brother Eddie was something of an author. And the episode, his description of this baton charge and the happenings, was such that my brother Steve vetoed it as being dangerous. Among other things, Eddie said was that the baton charge had been led by Police Superintendent Savage by name and a coward by nature. This actually did appear, and what Eddie would have got for writing it, I don't know. But one of the poor fellas at Roland Scale that sold the paper, he got 2 months.
My name is Frederick Thomas Otterburn. I am a retired police inspector. My only recollections of the general strike are of this day when the Chopwell miners were brought to court and there was trouble with the police on Askew Road when the police made a baton charge and threw the miners into disarray and breaking up the band. Other than this occasion, the only outstanding event was the escort of those miners who were willing to work and were escorted in police vans to the Fanny Hill pit at Sheriff Hill.
It's amazing how they're trying to break the strike by arresting Chopwell's union leaders on trumped up charges and the violence they used on people. They even said that shipped in farmers and dock workers from Hull and everything and put them in police uniforms. Basically anything to break the morale. In this next account, Jimmy Little, Anthony Wright and Bill Pearson explain how pickets dealt with the strikebreakers, or blacklegs, who attempted to keep the pits open in defiance of the movement.
There was picketing in the village. It used to start at Blackhole Mill, and one of the main picketing points was at the Chopwell Hotel. At the time, I can remember there was a Mr. Short, a Mr. Bale, a Mr. Bolton, a Mr. Gilliland, the Lauthers, and the McNestries was more or less our leaders at that time. There was blacklegs, what we call blacklegs. That was men working for the colliery. They used to be picked up by police, and they made the coal lorry that used to deliver the coals around the streets, which was a page field. They made it into like a Black Maria, and they used to come and pick the blacklegs up and take them up to the colliery and therefore bring them back. But from my recollection, I cannot remember of one of those blacklegs staying in Chopwell after the 1926 strike. Some went to Washington, some went, well, I think they all left because the war was boycotted.
When the blacklegs were coming out of the pit, we used to meet them after they got off the colliery premises and walk home with them, get them in the middle of a crowd and just walk at what we termed the funeral pace. And we used to sing hymns all the way till we got them home. And then when they got it, nobody ever touched them. You see, nobody ever touched them. You just walked with them, but they were hemmed in, but they had to walk just slow. And in those days, that was the way a funeral went, just a very slow walk. And that was the way they went. And we used to take them home, and as soon as they got in the house, we used to even sing a couple of hymns outside the door of the house before we left. And we always said it broke the morale of quite a few of them. And that was the Chopwell men's way of dealing with them.
But the best recollection is at Spen in Watson Street, where my grandparents lived. The chap next door was a blackleg. And in the mind, yes. And I was only, 6 at the time. And I wasn't allowed on the street to watch it, but looking from the upstairs window, seemed to recall him coming down the street between two what looked huge policemen. I suppose they were especially important in the area for this job, and the whole street, and I think probably the whole village, out booing and hissing at him till he got into the house, and even then booing and hissing round the house. The same man had moved from there shortly, and he hasn't been dead an awful long time, certainly since the war. And I believe that people in the Spen never spoke to him during that time.
Interesting to hear the McNestries mentioned there, Joe. What do you feel about that?
It's fascinating to hear family mentioned in sort of such circumstances, and historically. What can I say? We're a political family.
George Alsop, Bill Pearson and Anthony Wright remind us that despite the bleak outlook, villagers still made efforts to create their own entertainment. Even something as simple as forming a new village football team became controversial in the politically charged atmosphere of the time.
And as I said before, living on 1/6 a week voucher, well, there wasn't very much enjoyment. You had to make your own enjoyment. We used to have our own little bits of concerts. There used to be the local singers in the village used to have what were termed a melodeon, and there used to be banjos. They used to have, in the summer nights, they would congregate at the top of the street and singing sometimes revolutionary songs. And I remember one song they used to sing, "You'll get pie in the sky when you die." There's a preacher comes out every night for to teach you what's wrong and what's right. When you ask him for something to eat, he will answer in accents so sweet. "You'll get pie in the sky when you die. Work all day, feed on here. You'll get pie in the sky when you die."
Another thing I do remember, it was for entertainment, just down between St. Pat's Church and Gacefield. There was an old field on the right-hand side. It was fairly flat. And I remember seeing a women's football match in there. It was 2 teams, I believe, from Highfield that were taking part in it. Again, probably some of the older people in Highfield will remember it and may have even taken part in it. But I also remember that I think it was the first women's football match I'd seen. It was more of a battle than a football match.
They even set a football team away here, and they applied to the Durham Football Association to play as Chopwell Soviets. But they weren't long in telling us there's no politics in football, and you will not let you in the league unless you change your name. So they made another application, and they said, "Well, can we join as Chopwell Reds?" Said, "No, that's just the same as the other one. You're not getting under there." So they picked a name for the football team, And on the membership card, it had on about them refusing to let us in the Durham FA under Chopwell Soviets and Chopwell Reds, and they forced us to play under the bloodthirsty name of Chopwell White Star. That was the name that they gave us. Of course, they were known as the Soviet team, and they had a good team. You know, they went about 3 years, and that was what they named the Durham. They say, let in the league as Chopwell White Star.
Even when they were on strike, there were always football matches, cricket matches, and just anything to keep the public spirit together, keep the morale up. Finally, we learn how the end of the strike did not mark the end of the struggle for the people of Chopwell. Those who had been politically active during the lockout were often victimised, denied employment, and in many cases evicted from their homes.
And when everything was over, what happened was people left. They went to different parts of the country. There was quite a lot went to Doncaster. They're still there. They never came back, and the ones that went away, there was quite a lot went foreign. 2 of my brothers was among them. The other ones, because families like ours, we just didn't get a start when it finished. Anybody that spoke out of turn when the strike was on, then they were victimised when the strike was finished. And those people never got a start after the strike. There was some of them, there were 30 years before they got a start. You know, they just didn't want them.
The 26th strike was settled, and this was a sellout by the Trade Union Congress, by the way. The manager was in a position that he used to select the kind of people that he would employ, and naturally he had a blacklist of names, and my dad was one of them because he was a strong trade unionist. In fact, he was chairman of the Chopwell Miners' Lodge for a period during the 1926 strike. And both my dad and the family, along with the other active trade unionists in the village, were one of the last ones to commence work. The miners were singled out for the 1926 strike because the government of that day felt that if they could defeat the miners, then they could defeat the rest of the industrial workers in the country. So they attacked the miners by trying to get them to work longer and for reduced wages, for the economic reasons that we were in an economic crisis, and this was the only way to solve the economic crisis. And when the general strike took part, when the rest of the industrial workers of this country supported the miners, it got so strong that the strike lasted somewhere in the region of about 9 days at the general strike. And the militancy was so strong at that particular time that the General Council of the TUC felt that if they didn't cooperate with the employing class and the present government at that particular time, that the workers were almost in a position where they were going to take not only political power, but they were going to take industrial power. They could see the strength of the working class at that particular time because there wasn't a thing moving. Transport was at a standstill. The coal mining industry was at a standstill. The fishermen, they were on strike in support of the miners. So the TUC wasn't strong enough to control the situation, and they were afraid that it would get out of hand, and therefore it came what they called the Black Friday, when G.H. Thomas and Ramsay MacDonald and these fellows, they sold the They went and met the representatives of the government and settled the strike behind the backs of the working class.
The general strike only lasted 9 days, but the miners' strike went on much longer. My father had worked at Chopwell, where they were on strike almost a year before the general strike. Then after the general strike, people weren't keen on taking men from Chopwell mine into work. Although I believe the agreement said no victimisation, I think the Chopwell miners were victimised. I mean, my wife's father, he was a long time getting work. He was also working at Chopwell.
A note here tells somewhere was setting men on, and away they would go, come back. No, I can remember them going up to the Spain office, and the manager came to the, oh, go away to hell, there's no work for you. That's true.
Oh, well, I didn't get to start work when the pits recommenced. My brother never got to start work. Matt Joyce never got to start work. Several others never got to start work. All through their union activities. Now, my brother never took any real part in during the picketing and one thing during the strike, but he was a very keen socialist and union man, and he never got to start work. My brother was chucked out of his house. Matt Joyce was thrown out of his house. There were several other ones thrown out of their house. No work for them. Wherever anybody had taken any active part in unionism or anything, no work, chucked out the houses. The man at the colour then was a chap called Murray, William Murray. And the agent was T.R. Ridpath. As we said before, Matt was one of the gentlemen that was chucked out of his colliery house through his union activities. And he happened to be in the colliery canteen when Mr. Ridpath landed in with the 3 workmen that was removing him. He'd got his notice from the coal board and they were chucking him out of his house. And it was a great day for Matt. Matt says, he says, I've lived to see this day. He says, who the hell do you like to be chucked out of your house? He said, you chucked me out of my house, who do you like to be chucked out? But there was no response from Mr. Ridpath.
So it's interesting to hear all these stories, and it just brings home just how hard it must have been and just how determined they were in the circumstances to win, which sadly they didn't.
I've found it really interesting going through all the history, and even though you know about it, you kind of I've known about it all my life, but when it's all coming together now with all these different stories and hearing these voices and real live people, I just find it gives us goosebumps, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I have.
The day is drawing near. You'll have to change your language, lads. You'll have to change what cheer. But leave your picks behind you. You'll ne'er need them again. And off you go to Nottingham. Join Robin's merry men.